I mean, you've said, these are your words, I'm just saying this to our viewers because obviously Alex knows what he said, but for the sake of our viewers, Alex Antic, this is Senator Alex Antic, said his worst fears were confirmed, quote, during the COVID period, Home Affairs actively sought censorship of true statements such as lockdowns are ineffective and compelled social media companies to penalise dissent from the government's position. What does this say, Alex, about freedom of speech?
Well, look, it says it's on very thin ice at the moment, Alan, and, there are no overall freedom of speech provisions for individuals in this country like there are in the United States when those things are bricked into the Constitution. Here in this country, we have a very different regime, and it does allow, in many instances, for freedom of speech to be stepped on using legislative provisions like this so-called Combating Misinformation Bill. I think Australians need to understand how frail our democracy is. And, it was Ronald Reagan, I think, who said that, you have to be vigilant with your freedoms and you have to fight for them every day. We're living through an era now where I think that's never been more true. And COVID really, to my mind, showed us that we cannot be complacent with these things, and we've got to continue to expose them and to fight for these freedoms because, one day we're talking about COVID and what's true and what's not. The next day we might be talking about climate change and, we might have a department pulling down posts that say, the earth isn't actually heating or, whatever the issue may be, or maybe something completely different of the issue of the day. This is dangerous stuff and it's a slippery slope and it doesn't take long to go from bad to really bad when it comes to these sorts of issues.
And these governments and others, because I know I had extensive arguments, not exchanges with governments, many heated. Alex, I was taking some people to lunch. Actually, it was a reunion in a way of one of the rugby teams that I'd coached, and there were about 12 of us to lunch. And in walked 4 police people with guns, great big guns, which terrified everybody. And in full view of everyone in the restaurant, they were going 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because you're only allowed a certain number of people. So I immediately rang the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, and said, what the hell's going on here? And she said, Alan, very angrily, we're trying to save lives. I thought, oh, hello. So here were people who'd escaped the tyranny of militarisation in Europe, waking up in the morning to find people in the streets with guns.
It's absolutely true. And I mean, many, many times throughout the course of that era, those years, I would have people from Eastern Europe who would come to me and say, look, we left our country because of this sort of behaviour. We didn't expect to get it in Australia. And I sort of developed the thesis over that period of time that Australians, because we are the lucky country, and we were the lucky country throughout the last 100 years, haven't had to be as vigilant with our freedom as we perhaps need to be. In the United States, they're very, very, very careful with these sorts of things. And we need to be more so careful of them in this country as well, because ultimately COVID shows how quickly things can be eroded.